Well, last month, Karen and I attended a 3-day seminar that was sponsored by the West Central region of Unity Worldwide Ministries, and the title was Healthy Congregations. And it started off with a really interesting idea that eventually became the theme for the entire program. So here's the idea. There is no way to do it wrong. What if you really believed that this was true of life? In life, there's no way to do it wrong. What if you really believed that this was true of life? All right, so you don't have to say anything, but what does that bring up for you? Does it bring up some anxiety in people? Bring up a little anxiety? That's for some. Is anybody having any resistance? Some people look at that, and the reaction, this happened for quite a few people at this seminar, the reaction was something like, well, that's just plain wrong. How dare you say there's no way to do it wrong? There's a right way and a wrong way to do everything. And everyone knows that. And we have to make sure that we are always, always, always doing it right by God. And if you're not sure what the right way is, don't worry, I'll tell you. Right? Isn't it amazing how we've been programmed by our culture to be a bunch of fault finders? We're not encouraged to look for the good. Instead, we're supposed to look for what's wrong and then make sure that everybody knows about it, right? We see those people on TV all the time, don't we? On TV, they call them pundits. Out here in the real world, we have other more colorful words that we use to describe the fault finders we see on TV. What we end up doing is we create these models of perfection for everyone that few people can live up to. And then we wonder why people are constantly stressed out and suffering from chronic fatigue and other conditions. I mean, since when has it ever been a compliment to be called a perfectionist? It's kind of an insult, isn't it? What do you think of when you hear the word perfectionist? Maybe things like, I don't know, nitpicker, obsessive, type A, impossible to please. Not a good thing. So our culture gives us mixed messages and causes confusion, and our religious traditions, they're not much better. Growing up, I got all sorts of mixed messages from religion. I had a Catholic background. I was taught that children, newborn babies, they're not born in a state of original goodness. They're born in a state of original sin. We were born flawed and wrong right from the start. And yet, there's all this pressure. Be a good boy. Get good grades. Get all the merit badges and become an Eagle Scout. All that kind of stuff. All this pressure. We learn to measure our self-worth by what other people think about us and say about us, by how well we conform to these images that everyone else makes for us. We learn how to compare ourselves to others. And in that process, well, maybe we could take some pleasure in feeling that we were somehow better or superior to someone else. More likely, though, we would see someone out there who was doing things better than we did, and so there we go, scrambling to step up our game. And the only options we get when we play that game, the only two options we get when we play that game are to feel superior or inferior. Now I ask you, does that sound like sanity? Does that sound like a sane way to live? And speaking of mixed messages, what about the Bible? Matthew chapter 5, verses 43 through 48, Jesus says, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect." Okay, later on in chapter 6, he tells us this. Don't worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? I call that the don't worry, be happy verse. Bobby McFerrin. Don't worry, be happy, but make sure you're perfect. So which one is it, Jesus? Don't worry or be perfect, because I can't seem to find a way to get those two things to work together, and I get anxious just thinking about it. It's kind of the way it works. How can you not worry when you're trying to be perfect? Does that sound like sanity to you? And what does it even mean to be perfect? And it's not like we're in a dog show, you know. In a dog show, they have written standards of perfection for every breed in a show, which means that our golden retriever Tara stands a better chance of ever being found perfect than I ever will. And she is. There she is. I'll tell you about that in just a minute. You know, she doesn't worry. She doesn't worry about how long her tail is or whether her nose is short enough or whatever. She doesn't care about breed standards. As far as she's concerned, the world is her oyster, and human beings exist to pet her and tell her how beautiful she is. Then she goes to the park, she chases a ball, and if there are goose or turkey droppings on the ground for her to roll in, so much the better. Life is good. She loves being a dog, and a dog is the only thing that she wants to be. She is perfectly comfortable in her own skin and fur, and you know what? That's the way it can be for us too. Those two passages in Matthew actually give us a profound koan to meditate on. Karen mentioned earlier this Thursday evening at Spirit Wind, I'm going to be talking about Zen Buddhism. And in certain Zen traditions, koans are used, and they're riddles or stories that are used during training. And this is the definition that comes from the abbot of the Zen monastery in New York, where I spent some time. He says that a koan is an apparently paradoxical statement or question used in Zen training to induce in the student an intense level of doubt, allowing them to cut through conventional and conditioned descriptions of reality and see directly into their true nature. That's what koans are all about. So don't worry, be perfect. That sets up a real paradox, doesn't it? One heck of a paradox. Well, Alan Watts, who was a well-known Zen teacher, he calls this a double bind. Okay, it's like telling someone to act naturally or to do a relaxation exercise, right? You know, it's a contradiction that causes tension, it raises doubt, it raises confusion. Those are all good things because they're just a signal that we have to go deeper. We have this invitation to cut through our conventional and conditioned notions of who we are and see directly into our true nature. We hear Jesus, we hear other people using the word perfect, and we immediately go to our conventional and conditioned notions of what that means and how it applies to us. We get into our dog and pony show mentality, we compare ourselves to others, we set up these impossible standards, we get stuck in a superficial level of reality. We're stuck there as long as we choose to buy into this stuff. That's the way it works. And when we choose to buy into that stuff, we end up spending all sorts of time gawking and talking about someone I heard about a couple weeks ago, someone named Millie Cyrus or something who did a naughty dance on TV. Everybody's talking about Millie Cyrus or whatever her name. Yeah, whatever. You know, everybody's talking about her, what's good about it, what's bad about it. Don't we have more important things to be talking about? Like maybe what we should be doing for the refugees who are pouring out of Syria now because they're being bombed out of their homes? No conversation about that, but Millie Cyrus gets all the time. Amazing. There's a reason we do that. Alan Watts, the Zen teacher, calls it the taboo against knowing who you are. He says this, he says, the most strongly enforced of all known taboos is the taboo against knowing who or what you really are behind the mask of your apparently separate, independent, and isolated ego. Both religion and science have their own ways of enforcing this taboo, and they've done a good job of it over the years. So many religions try to keep human beings in a position of subservience and groveling before an imperial deity. And this deity treats human beings as unworthy peasants who are in need of salvation. That's one way of enforcing that taboo. Science can turn us into flesh and blood machines, and we're forced to use technology to try and control and manipulate a hostile and frightening world. Together, they help us to create this mask of a separate, independent, and isolated ego. I think it's time for that kind of religion and science to go bye-bye. And it is. They're both being replaced by a new level of awareness. Call it a new level of consciousness. And we say it's new, but a lot of it isn't particularly new. Alan Watts talks about this new level of consciousness by paraphrasing an ancient Hindu parable, which goes something like this. He says, God is the self of the world. But you can't see God for the same reason that without a mirror, you can't see your own eyes. And you certainly can't bite your own teeth or look inside your head. Yourself is that cleverly hidden because it is God hiding. That's the old Hindu parable about God hiding in humanity and hiding in the earth. So, the true self is God in hiding. Our job is to simply recognize that that's the way it is. And then live in accordance with that truth. God is the self. God in hiding. In the world of science, we find the words of Erwin Schrödinger. He was one of the pioneers of quantum mechanics. He won the Nobel Prize in physics. He says this, "Inconceivable as it seems to ordinary reason, you and all other conscious beings as such are all in all. Hence, this life of yours which you are living is not merely a piece of the entire existence, but is in a certain sense the whole. Only this whole is not so constituted that it can be surveyed in one single glance." It's not always easy to see, but the truth is we're all in all, the whole, the allness of God expressing through us as our true self. And then we have Jesus, who simply says, "Be perfect, as your heavenly Father is perfect." So now we can look at this from a new perspective. Jesus is simply inviting us to recognize and accept who we truly are. Notice that he doesn't say, try to be perfect, or strive to be perfect, or work to be perfect, or try this 7-step process to become perfect. He just says, be. Just like it was something natural and intuitive, which is what Alan Watts and Erwin Schrödinger are getting at there. You know, they say in Zen, you don't become a Buddha by sitting and meditating. You're already a Buddha who happens to be sitting there and meditating. Or a golden retriever rolling on something on the ground. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you, because they, like you, are all in all. God in hiding. We start right where we are, and that's always sufficient. One last quote from Myrtle Fillmore, who's the co-founder of our Unity movement. She says this. She says, "So get busy by using the truth you know. Love those about you in a practical way. Be kind," right? "Pay no attention to what others are doing insofar as to make comparisons. Bring forth your own joyous world of love, friendship, beauty, and plenty. God is giving everything required to build such a world. there is within you the God-given intelligence to build such a world. Get at it. Get at it. What a gem that is. What an absolute gem that is. Start where you are, using the truth that you know right now. Love in a practical way. Be kind. Do not compare yourself to others. Remember that compare leads to despair. Don't accept the arbitrary standards of perfection that get imposed on us by the outer world. Don't buy into the taboo against knowing who you really are, because we already have everything we need to create a joyous world of love, friendship, beauty, and plenty. Sainthood? Not required. Perfection? Forget about it. There is no way to do it wrong. So, as Myrtle said, get at it. See you next week.